AI kind of reveals potentials and possibilities. And one of these possibilities is to really use it in such a way to kind of give people a sense that they're being seen. I mean, I'm talking about the customer kind of thing. So that's what I'm interested in.
Welcome to That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you will hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. Well, I am just back from an amazing IAPI event in Dublin where Mark Kingsley was talking to a packed room of the good and the great from Adland in Ireland. And afterwards, Mark kindly stayed behind to have a chat with me that I'm now able to share with you today. So for those of you who don't know, Mark is an award-winning designer, brand strategist, and author of the Universal Principles of Branding. And during this conversation, as well as understanding Mark's career, his influences, we talk about Carlos Santana, his work at HP, where Mark says they printed everything I created. We talk about the creativity and the balance in corporate demands. We talk about global branding challenges, his strategic approach to maintaining brand identity, some of the work he did at Ogilvy. Of course, we chat a lot about his book, The Universal Principles of Branding, how it came about, the impact of it. We touch on the role of AI and how AI can help democratize design tools, but also how there really still needs to be human element in creativity. This is a fascinating episode, and a huge thanks to IAPI, the team there, Charlie, Catherine, and Shrisha, who has left, of course, but to the amazing team at IAPI for helping facilitate this, and really appreciate it. Mark's partner, Lisa, hanging out for the conversation as well and taking photos of us. So we will get into today's episode. Of course, if you are listening to That's What I Call Marketing or watching us on YouTube, and you can rate or review the episode that you're watching, like it or subscribe or leave a review for us or leave a comment. It really is an amazing help to us, and so many of you are doing it, and I am so grateful to everybody that takes the few seconds to do that, because it truly is a way to help us grow on this amazing community of marketers just like you. So thank you so much for doing that. So let's get into today's episode with the wonderful Mark Kingsley.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.
Mark, thanks a million for joining me on That's What I Call Marketing. Wonderful to have you here after the amazing event by IAPI.
Thank you. It was wonderful. I mean, Charlie and IAPI, I just learned how to say the name of that organization today. IAPI, they've been really wonderful, very supportive, and very welcoming and very gracious and open hearts and all the things. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, no, they are a great crew. Listen, there's so much to talk to you about, a huge amount. But I do want to start with Irish music. You've a place in your heart for Irish music.
I spent I got to start in designing record packaging, music packaging, and one of my first clients was a label based out of Connecticut called Green Linnet that licensed a lot of Irish music out of Ireland and supplied it to the United States. And I got to work with like some of the greats. We did 3 packages for Martin Hayes, a couple packages for Eileen Ivers, who's the Riverdance violinist, and Patrick Street. Lord, I mean, it's just like so many of them. It was a good like maybe decade of my life.
Amazing.
And it was also on-the-job training, because the work that I did at the beginning wasn't, could have been better, but I got better. I got better as time went on.
There.
Yeah, definitely. And then Green Linnet expanded into a world music label called Xenophile, and so we started doing like African music, the Sabri Brothers, great Kowali group. So it expanded from there, and Green Linnet, the work I did for Green Linnet and the music packaging I did for them, opened doors for other record labels. And so we would send samples to other labels, and we're like, well, that's the only reason we're talking to is because of that work. So.
How did you, I mean, the music packaging thing, you said here today, it was something that you really wanted to get into. Like, why and how? Were you a music lover?
Carlos Santana.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
In 1977, 78, he performed at the California Jam, It was on television. And I came from a very Western New York, very white, very kind of working class, kind of farming, but more of like a farming community. And Carlos Santana couldn't have been more exotic for me. He was, from another country, spoke another language, played guitar, like was concerned with like kind of spiritual things that it was only beginning to kind of wrap my mind around. And it was just, I was transfixed. And his record packaging at the time was glorious. He hired like some of the great light show artists of the 1960s out of that, like the Fillmore East, the Fillmore West kind of light show projections. He would hire them to do his packages, and I was transfixed.
That's amazing, isn't it? And that kind of I was reading some of Marcus Collins' books, but there's actually Today in the Wind, and he's talking about those moments in your life where you kind of get out of your own tribe and start experiencing other cultures, other experiences, other tribes.
Well, it's important to do that. I mean, so Santana, I jokingly call him my Lord and Savior sometimes, which is a little sacrilegious, but I do that because his example of who he played with. And from Carlos Santana, I got to John McLaughlin, I got to Miles Davis, and then John Coltrane, and then everything else beyond that. And so it just opened up my mind culturally to people from other backgrounds, other ethnicities, other languages. And that was like the first step that I needed to take on a journey.
And then you got to design for John Coltrane. Like, that's incredible. I love these moments. Like, wow.
Yeah. That was because of Ravi. His son Ravi was under contract with BMG, and we did his. I think he had already had one record out, so we did his first record on BMG, then one he did on Savoy, and. I don't just like Ravi's such an amazing, beautiful person. Like you want to. I felt very kind of nurturing for him, and I got to meet his mother a couple times too, Alice.
Wow.
So that was really, and I was quite honestly, I was more of like an Alice. I mean, I love John Coltrane, but Alice's music really sent me. So when I had the opportunity to meet Alice, that was special. And you show love, you appreciate like what you're doing, and you kind of demonstrate that you care immensely about it. So one thing led to another, and at one point Ravi discovered these tapes in a. He was just going through old tapes in the family house, and it was a thing that was marked like Louis Armstrong or something. He's like, oh, what the hell? I'll just listen to it, see what it is, and then he realizes that it was a rare recording of a radio broadcast, and that's what this was. This was a legendary radio broadcast, and so that's what we ended up doing.
Amazing, incredible. And you, before we kind of move out of the music period, you did win a Grammy.
I was nominated.
But
nominated.
For
me, it's like winning. Because to get nominated, they go through 3 rounds of panels around the country of all like music industry people. So getting nominated is really very hard. Now, the whole winning the Grammy thing, what happens is that the list goes out to the general populace.
Okay.
And so anyone can vote on anything. And
really?
Yeah. So like if I used to be a member of the Academy, so I could vote on the best flamenco record. Now, I know what the best flamenco record was at the time, but I had that opportunity. So it's not necessarily a discerning crowd, let's say, at that level, but to get nominated. And it was also a wonderful moment because I called my mother and I said I got nominated, and she, brought a tear to her eye, so that was wonderful.
Yeah, because I think maybe in this industry sometimes as well, it's hard to explain what we do.
But you got nominated for a Grammy. My mother got it.
Exactly. You can point to that. It was kind of then you said that kind of the MP3 kind of come along and basically kind of things change in the music industry, and then you needed to kind of.
I had to. Well, the other thing is like something I would make, like even for like a jazz package for like BMG, right? You don't get paid that much money. I mean, the designer Mike Mills once described working in designing record covers as the quickest way to the poorhouse, and he's correct. So. Prices went down. So like I would, what used to be paid, for like a moderately sized jazz performer, like $5,000 for a package, went down to $1,500.
Right.
Right. And now there are record labels that are like, will you do it for $650?
Okay.
So, it's not sustainable. I still design record packages, but I do it for people I love. I do it for friends. So.
Now, I'm not going to try use can you say the Italian word?
Scordatura.
Oh, I love the way you say it like that. So you had to kind of retune.
Yeah, that's what it means.
A bit. And I know then that you went in, kind of more of the, let's call it the corporate side of the world. You did work with Hewlett Packard, and I was fascinated to hear and read you have said that was one of the greatest experiences of your life.
Yeah, it was. Oh, and it was also one of the more inconceivable experiences of my life too. Basically, a friend of mine, a dear friend of ours, was doing this work, profoundly talented designer, and asked us to kind of come in and help do sketches. And it ended up where the client kind of preferred my work to his, and so I ended up with this assignment for a good year and a half, where basically anything that kind of came to my mind, they printed.
Really?
It was insane. It was it was unheard of. It's irresponsible almost. But like at one point, Wired magazine, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
At one point there was like 3 spreads of my work in Wired magazine, one after the other, and I was like, what universe am I living in? So
was it the was it that freedom you had that was what was so great about it?
Well, it was the irresponsibility of a client accepting everything that I did. I mean, I would call it irresponsible, but I guess it met the brief and it did the project that did the work that it needed to do. So I guess I was lucky in that sense, right? But yeah, that's kind of like what I think about it, And the other part of it is that because I don't say yes to everything,
right?
I have moments in my life where I will have no money in the bank, and then I'll have a lot of money in my bank.
Okay.
So before HP, we literally had $250 in the bank.
Wow.
And then HP comes in, and then I made a good
you did okay.
advertising money for a year.
Yeah.
So you have to when you sign up for a life in this industry, you kind of put your hand on the Bible and say, I am here for the act of creation. I am here for the act of engaging with other people, of like being in the world. I'm not here for the money.
Okay. Yeah. Because it can come and go, right?
Exactly. And that's that line from John Cage: "Never have a job, because a job is something that someone can take away from you."
Oh, do you know what? And so, and I'm being really honest. Like a year and a bit ago, I went through redundancy, and I'm still kind of navigating, trying to get out the other side of it. And that is so true.
Yeah.
That it can be taken away from you, and it's very difficult. And so having, I guess a purpose or stuff outside of that is incredibly helpful. But whatever that is, right? And
the funny thing is that I've allowed myself to go on staff at various points in my life, and I've played the one off to the other. So the being self-employed and then going on staff. If you're self-employed and then you go on staff, you kind of go out of the cycles of projects coming through.
Yeah.
But when you're on staff and you want to go work for yourself, you now have to start that engine back up again. So
yeah, exactly. And your kind of business development, you're doing everything. So the joy, I think, sometimes of being on staff is that other stuff
for you.
Yeah. Fascinating. And you're part of the team that shaped City Global's branding
during the financial crisis, and so that was. But I was the global creative lead at Landor Associates, and my only client was Citi. That's all I had. And we had a really wonderful and interesting partnership with Citi at the time. The head of global brand, she used to be a design director at Landor in San Francisco.
Okay.
So that's how that relationship began. And when she became head of global brand, they needed a creative director who could talk to people, basically.
Okay.
Who would show up at meetings and actually engage with people. And so, in other words, they needed a New Yorker. Okay. But the funny thing is that she started in the San Francisco office of Landor, which was the home office, the original office. And so she started working with the people from San Francisco, but they needed a New Yorker. So what they ended up doing was hiring a New Yorker to move to San Francisco to engage with a New York client. So I was on a plane all the time.
Oh, God.
It was fantastic. It was the height of Virgin America. It was a great airline at the time. I loved it. Yeah.
They were. That kind of the global work, I think, I'm fascinated again. When I worked Indeed, I worked at across 10 global markets, and it's fascinating to try get the balance of global, because you've got scale for you want for the brand and the design and all the elements, but then there are local nuances.
Well, that's part of the wonder. That's
Right.
the wonder of the thing, and it's how do you navigate that? So, when we were working with Citi, we would do these brand audits, and we would do brand road shows, basically. Yeah. And the road shows would be like we'd go to Brazil, and everyone from Latin America all the regional offices in Latin America would go to Sao Paulo, and we would have like a couple days of, all right, this is really, we need to make sure that we're on the same foot about what the brand stands for and how do we use things and how do we speak about things.
Yeah.
Okay? And at the same time, we were doing brand audits, which was documenting everything from digital experience to in what they call retail, inside the banks, to advertising, to like how the credit cards look, you name it. And we were building this kind of incredible database that we would then became material for an intranet project that we were doing, where we had a global marketing awards within Citi that was all submitted via digitally and judged digitally by people all around the world. So what happened was that we found, after our brand audits and our road shows, and then eventually this intranet, we found that offices from one region would talk to another without going through global brand, which was what we wanted. We wanted that kind of sense of collaboration. So we would see, for example, like people from like the Japanese and the Brazilian offices kind of speaking together. Oh, we liked what we saw there. Can you tell us more about that?
Right.
That kind of thing.
That is amazing, and it's hard to actually get that and make it happen because there's just so much going on for people.
Well, then there are also like variation, like regional specificities, which get weird. For example, like in Japan, when you become a bank customer, there's an expectation of a gift, or there's like some sort of gift economy about that. So, and then in Hong Kong, if one bank does something down the road, they put a bunting, or they use a little design, a little thing hanging somewhere, they do lines in a certain way, then every bank will copy that.
Okay.
Right? So those are the things that we would push back on. And so the reason why, the advantage of working with Landor, with Citi, is that Landor had regional offices all over the world, which for loosely kind of aligned with Citi's regional marketing offices.
Right.
So what happens is that they had partnerships with the local groups to make sure that there was like from two different sides, from the people doing the design work and also from the home office, we were making sure that everyone was together. So my job as the global head of creative was that it was a 24/7 job because it was BlackBerry days.
I remember them.
So my BlackBerry would go off early in the morning with someone from Europe, and it would go off late at night with someone from Singapore.
Yeah.
So I'd have to be constantly in communication with people. But it was great. I mean, I built a network of friends around the world. So.
And it does give you that, insight's probably the wrong word, but just that, experience of the things that matter in different countries and different cultures. I remember doing work in India, and we had to really dig deep into just understanding like the cultural system in India, and we spent a lot of time, with the local team there who were explaining to us, education and the caste system and all that. And I'm in Dublin and I've never been to India. It's really important that I felt I understood it. Not that I knew it. I think there's such a difference between understanding and knowing, because I haven't lived or known it. But at least that I could kind of start to understand it. So then the conversations that were being had about certain things, I had some level of context.
Yeah, and it gets even like things like caste are one thing. Like, so I remember having a conversation with someone from Landor in our Middle East area, and describing all the differences in just even the advertising.
Yeah,
you can't do a generic advertising and consider it for the Middle East, because the patterning of the keffiyeh, the patterning of like subtle things like just like one fabric.
Yeah.
Determines whether someone's from Saudi Arabia or the UAE or Lebanon or whatever, right? And so it has to be hyper specific.
Yeah.
And then there were other weird things like in Moscow, like to see how incredibly compliant they were with brand standards to the point of obsession. It was insane. I mean, very, very good rule followers. For example, our brand standards for the internal decor of the banks, of the retail banks. One image had yellow tulips in a glass vase. So when we show up in Moscow, every branch has yellow tulips.
Oh, wow.
And yellow tulips weren't in season, so it was.
What were they doing to get them?
They found a way to do it. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. That is incredible. Those, and I found as well, in some ways, some of the teams I worked with were almost lived up to some of the stereotypes you had about countries. Like, it was very, I enjoyed it. We used to joke about it all the time, but it was one of the parts of my job I loved a lot. Onto more global work that you did, and you did the global repositioning for Ogilvy as well. And I read as well that you said some.
Well, I was part of the team that did.
Part of the team, okay. But I did read that you said that some of David Ogilvy's quotes were almost polluting the company in a way.
Well, it's the kind of thing with every company with a charismatic founder.
Yeah.
Like even Landor is the same thing, right? So Landor does a thing once a year on Walter Landor's birthday. They close all the offices around the world, and they do Walter's Day.
Oh, wow, okay.
Right, and they do some sort of internal, like team building or brand building or some sort of like kind of realignment, and it's different for every city and every country. And there's a certain kind of death cult quality about it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
yeah.
like you'll see Walter Landor quotes, like the one that I like to use. Products are made in a factory, but brands are created in the mind. I never was able to find like a definitive, like this is where he said it and when. So, but there would be signs around the office like WWD, what would Walter do?
Okay.
That kind of stuff.
Right, okay.
And then when Landor and Fitch merged, I saw all of a sudden, I forget the guy's first name, Fitch, but I would see all of a sudden these quotes from him about creativity. And so this whole thing about charismatic founders is it's a burden, and a curse. Yeah, I think it's a curse at times.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating because the world needs them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? The world needs those people, the visionaries.
You need mavericks to go, like, what the fuck, let's build. And that's the thing. I mean, like, David Ogilvy's first note, there's a famous note that he wrote to everyone, like, I'm not looking for yes men. I want mavericks, I want people that are going to push, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when you have this kind of excessive focus on the founder and all the words that the founder said, the sacred texts of the founder. I mean, there are tons of books from David Ogilvy on advertising. That becomes a burden and a curse.
Yeah, like it's incredibly powerful. You've written an amazing book, a beautiful book here, and if people are watching, you can see it there, but if you're listening, you can't see. But you should go online, and it's the Universal Principles of Branding. Mm-hmm. What was it, kind of the moment where you said, I'm going to sit down and write this book?
It was a phone call. I mean,
was it?
It's like Cole Porter once said, like what his greatest influence was, and he said it was a phone call. So basically, it was an email from the publisher. I've always had kind of book leanings, and I've done a lot of kind of critical writing or quasi-theoretical writing on design and visual culture. But because of all that previous work, the publisher reached out and said, would you be interested in writing this book on branding? And he said, you need to do 100 principles. And I'm like, well, I can give you 60. And he's like, no, it's got to be 100. So it was made to order, I guess, in a sense. But what it did, it was a good hard 2 years because I had to really dig deep and try and discern that. And the funny thing is that now that the book is out, I've got a list of like 25 others that for the next edition, and because they have occasionally done expanded editions.
Okay.
So if there is an expanded edition, I'm ready.
You're ready for the next 25.
The bullet's loaded.
So how did you, like 2 years process, but how did you get from 60 to 100 and then kind of figure out which were the 100 that you felt needed to be in the book?
I came up with a conceit, and the conceit was, branding loves the customer journey. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll do a brand journey. So it's how do I define what a brand is? What are the definitions around brand? Because a lot of my interest was for this book not to be another recipe book.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
Is, how to supercharge your brand with logo design or something. I didn't want to do that at all. I wanted it to be more of a meditative kind of introspective quality. Like, what is it about brands themselves? And so I had to let's define what a brand is. And then I'm like, okay, this book needs also to be useful for people who actually make brands, right?
Yeah.
And also deliver and deal with the public. So I have a section on designing a brand, which is naming and classic graphic design aspects, environmental aspects, kind of concerns about the haptics of a brand. Like how does, TD Ameritrade, which is a bank all across the United States.
Right.
And I don't really know them as a bank because I've never banked with them. But if I need a pen, I walk in and they got pens everywhere, right? And so I'm thinking, okay, I think of TD Ameritrade as a pen source. I've never needed to buy a pen in my life, not anymore. Right?
That's right.
I just walk in and get a green TD Ameritrade pen. But the thing is that these pens are plastic and they're light and they're cheap and they're like a $5 umbrella. It'll fall apart in the first drop of rain.
Yeah.
So what would happen if that pen had a little bit more of a heft or something? Then that haptic quality would give me a better association about TD Ameritrade as a bank, or it would change that as opposed to I need a pen. I'll just run in here and get it because they're everywhere.
Yeah.
So that was designing. It was also trying to expand beyond just a visual. Like here's how to do a logo.
Yeah.
And then the delivery aspect, a lot of the customer journey. The part of the customer journey, I'm saying not a lot. Part of the customer journey that I'm fascinated with is when people complain, and how do you resolve those complaints? And any kind of conflict resolution. And so that's also, in a sense, part of it as well.
I leaned in there because I worked in my very first career. I nearly burnt down Brody's Bistro in Dublin because I wanted to be a chef and I wasn't very good. Not intentionally. I left pecan nuts roasting in the oven overnight.
Oh.
Yeah. So, anyway, but I worked in hospitality and I loved those moments of, I didn't love someone being unhappy, but I loved the opportunity to change their perception and for them to leave happy.
So the gold standard in something like that comes from the Ritz Carlton Hotel.
Yeah.
Right? Because their brand tagline is ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. Okay? And I don't know if it's still true. I suspect it may be, but at a point, everyone who worked at the Ritz Carlton had a discretionary budget to resolve any conflict. So if you were vacuuming the floor in the hallway and you overhear someone come in after 10 o'clock and go, oh man, I wish the room service was open, I'm really hungry, that kind of thing. You have like $150, $100, whatever, $200 to say, oh, you know what, I heard what you said, I happen to know a sandwich place around the corner, let me go get you, what do you need? Don't worry, it's on me, it's okay, right? That becomes a resolution thing. And that's also ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. In other words, we see the people who work for us as people with agency, and then we give them permission to see our customers as people with agency instead of just, it's room number 3.
Or another department's problem. Like that's,
exactly.
And for me, I think, and you talked about it as well today. You talked about that example of you walking into that, the restaurant in New York, Chiquito, and they're, going like this with the hand, and they know that that's your bottle of wine, your place, even though you're only there once a month. That connection of brands with people, is the power of a brand. And I think sometimes people get confused by, when you say the word brand, I think sometimes in organizations, and we heard some of that today, how you bring people on the journey for brand transformation or whatever it is. People have misconceptions about what we mean by brand. I think people often think we go, oh, he wants to make a TV ad, right? And it's the full totality and the total value of the brand.
You are tuned in to That's What I Call Marketing with me, your host, Connor Byrne.
Are you facing the maze of global expansion? Diplomat introduces the diplomacy model, a cost-effective, innovative approach to navigating the complexities of your brand's presence in international markets. Visit diplomat.agency.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.
So I like, when I speak with new clients, I like having those conversations about the political ramifications. Do they have to deal with governments? Do they have to deal with, like kind of community board members and that kind of stuff? I love that messy part of it.
Yeah.
That's because that is something that they're going to have to deal with and that they're going to have to, in a sense, resolve. So let's kind of look at it at the beginning and see if we can use that problem to our advantage.
Yeah, and I think then that allows something else you've talked about is kind of the fluidity of a brand, right? So how do you balance that?
Well, it's the vagueness of a brand, right?
Right, vagueness,
like I
great,
said,
yeah.
like how medicine has expanded from, just like setting bones and suturing wounds. Medicine is now nutrition, it's exercise, it's psychology. So medicine is one of these professions that's expanded. And I think branding is potentially that as well.
How then, I mean, the idea of universal principles of branding and having one, like 100, my kind of read of it is you're not saying these are, like, this is the Bible. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there is, yeah.
And actually, I did, in the introduction, I do say, it's kind of, there is a certain kind of contradiction here by saying this is universal, right? And in the introduction, I use the example of gender politics today. Like how we have allowed, and we are, as a general society, there are still like reprobates, still around, like they're resistant to it. But we're open to the idea that someone can determine what their identity is, not from like how they were born, but how they feel and behave. And so what then that decoupling of gender from biology is interesting, and so I see that decoupling can happen in brands as well, and so then brands become these associations which are released from the tyranny of the holding company.
Yes.
So.
Do enough companies get that? Like, because I think
no, because and the reason it's because of just the economic system that we're in, right? And it's there's this intent drive towards returns and ROI and all that stuff. So it's easy to control the supply of the thing that you have, right?
Yeah.
The product or the service. But if you allow that product or service to be influenced and altered somehow by the way in which audiences will engage with it, that becomes interesting territory.
Yeah.
But legally, that's also
risky.
Fraud.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of examples of brands that you feel are doing this well right now?
The example I use of Gucci with Dapper Dan. Right?
Oh, please, yeah. Sorry, can I be, before you go into that, because it's really important, but this is going to make me sound as dumb as anything. Obviously, I knew the terminology Dapper Dan. Like, you'd say to people, you're Dapper. I didn't really know the story behind Dapper Dan, so maybe start at the Dapper Dan story and then
Well,
thank
first
you.
off, there was a pomade called Dapper Dan. In the 30s, 40s, 50s, or something like that. There was a hair product or something like that, and they kind of showed in that Coen Brothers film, "Oh Brother, Where Art You?"
Yeah, I love that.
So Dapper Dan was he like I said, he was a gambler and very observant of human nature and of the behaviors of other people around him, and was interested in designing clothes, and had noticed that companies like Louis Vuitton or Gucci in the late 70s, early 80s weren't really doing clothing made out of leather, but the leather was being used for handbags and purses and that kind of thing. And he was like, well, what if I do clothing, made out of leather, and I do it, and my audience kind of likes these logos. Why don't I just silkscreen these logos on the leather? And it was just... it's audacious, right?
Yeah.
But I have to give him credit. He found his way through the world. He made his path. It was hard because he would get raided.
Yeah.
Because of copyright infringement, and the police would take his products, and he'd have to start all over again. And so it was playing catching cat and mouse with the police for a while. And then when Mike Tyson gets into that fight in front of his boutique in 1987, 88 or so. Because it's Mike Tyson, it's world heavyweight champion. These images are reproduced all around the world, and so all the European brands start seeing their logos on things that they didn't make, and that's when the big heavy kind of legal attention went to Dapper Dan, and he had to close the boutique. So skip ahead 20 years when Alessandro Michele, the creative director at Gucci, puts a article of clothing on the runway that looks exactly like an early Dapper Dan jacket that he designed for Diane Dixon, the American Olympic sprinter. And the world had changed, and we had social media, and the audience had the ability to speak back to that brand, saying, "Oh, wait a second, no, you're copying Dapper Dan." Even though, I mean, even though legally, and according to the Bible, they had every right. They had every right to do whatever they did, but you can't alienate your audience that way, especially in the world of social media. So you have to allow this thing to emerge, and so they ended up going into partnership with him. He's got a beautiful brownstone, beautiful. Successful. I mean, he turned 80 like a couple years ago or something. So in the later part of his life, he has this acceptance and this stability and this kind of position in the community, which it's great. Where an interloper, where an outsider is now part of become a trusted partner. Yeah. And so now Gucci, you can go to his atelier and have a meeting with him. It's all like private. It's like going to a custom tailor. And you can use fabrics that are supplied by Gucci or accessories that are supplied by Gucci. And so it is a true partnership where they basically kind of reify the value of each other's brand for each other.
And you kind of it's loose control, I guess, in a way, isn't it? Like there is a looseness to it.
Well, I mean, Gucci still controls the fabric. Right?
Yeah.
So, and I have a suspicion, back in the day, Dan was serving what I affectionately call night people, like kind of hustlers and street hustlers and the sorts. And at one point was very famously associated with a pretty well-known drug kingpin at the time. They would ask him for bulletproof garments, which I totally understand.
Yeah,
I get that, but so I don't think he's doing bulletproof garments.
No, to imagine he is. So, probably smart move.
No, well, that was more out of necessity.
Yeah,
And because he was always always involved, always interested in how well people dress. Like one of his original thoughts was like how the way you're dressed influences the way that people treat you. Right, and so it's just an expansion of that, like an expansion of what I talk about when I'm talking about AI is like this concern about the subjectivity of another person, like seeing the other person as a mind, as an individual worth a certain kind of engagement.
AI, I do want to talk to you about it, because it is such an amazingly big topic, and there's lots of great stuff with AI. There's lots of scary stuff. I mean, even I keep reading about the environmental impact of it. I mean,
the servers,
recently read that, with OpenAI's, with their ambition for where they want to go with revenue, I read there isn't enough electricity in the US to actually serve that. So we'll park that because that's just...
Well, it's the same thing with crypto, right?
Yeah.
And we went from mining crypto by doing the hard math, and now there's there's degrees of authentication with crypto that kind of removes some of the computational pressure from that.
Yeah, but for designers and for kind of even beyond just the creative community, AI is seen to come in and potentially, like you showed the Adobe Cloud, which was Adobe was the tool of the designer, and now it's democratizing it where I can go into an Adobe product and I'm not a designer, and I can probably figure out something that's not going to be amazing.
You draw a little area on a photograph of a windowsill and say, put a cat here.
Yeah.
Right? It can do that. It'll give you, you want that cat, or that cat? I like that cat. Okay.
Yeah.
And it'll put it in there and it'll look pretty damn good.
Yeah. So what's the convergence going to be like? Because it isn't going away, but also, for me, the human element of design, I feel can't go away. It can't disappear because that's the power. I truly believe that. But where's the convergence?
I saw an Instagram reel, literally this morning, of Guillermo del Toro, the director, saying that AI right now has generated some really interesting screensavers. Right, and he made a really interesting point, and I think that there's something here. There's a truth here, that real art, there's an investment, and there's also a pain to it. There's a it has to hit you, it has to puncture your heart in a certain way. Roland Barthes called it the punctum. the thing that actually wounded you when you engaged with the text, right? And so like good art has that puncture in a sense, and a lot of stuff that we see doesn't. And the reason why is because it's become algorithms, right? Kind of tend to kind of channel people into like a median.
Yeah.
Like there's a distribution curve that's right down the middle, where these algorithms kind of push things, because algorithms in the way in which they're written, these AI algorithms, they want to perform. They want, I mean, not that there's any desire in them, but basically they're programmed to give you a good answer or something that will be acceptable. And so that level of acceptability hits within the middle of that distribution curve.
And I think for me, part of the fear is that a lot of work is kind of mushy middle, and there's a lot of people who are okay with, because they don't want to stick their head maybe above the parapet and, in an organization go, well, we'll just do that. It's fine. We'll get it through.
Well, that's also, the problem with boards.
Yeah.
And the presentations that we make, a lot of time, ideas that we come up with, we as a creative community, a lot of the ideas and proposals that we make are kind of a little bit sanitized for a board to go, yes. I mean, because that's the thing. I mean, we're working towards, we will be rewarded, and we will work towards a board or a committee to sign off on something and say yes, as opposed to, when like my experience with HP, where I'm just going to like design stuff and like it'll go out and get done, and it seemed to work. They seemed to be happy.
It obviously did, because they would have stopped, I'm guessing.
I mean, they were putting it in like like the New York Times, full page in the New York Times, Forbes magazine, Wired magazine. Yeah, so it obviously worked.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I said, it's outside that kind of oversight anxiety.
Yeah. And I think, because you talked about it again, it's that state of calculative thinking. Mm-hmm. We live in a world of quarterly reviews, KPIs,
charts,
ROI, and MBOrs, QBRs, whatever else ors. But then there's kind of the meditative piece. You're kind of like what again today come across to me was, you're saying there has to be the space for that. I don't think you were saying we can't have the calculative thinking.
No, I mean, the calculative thinking is something that we do every day. I wake up and I'm like, how much time do I have to lay in bed before I really have to get up and take the shower, right? That's all these calculations that we go through. But the meditative is, it's hard to square on a balance sheet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you need that capacity to just like let things emerge.
Yeah. And that's, there has to be the time for that, and then it's the time pressure, And I was talking to somebody recently who was saying, a key for probably clients is not to get derailed, and not to allow yourself get derailed when things don't go your way. So when you bring it to the board and they're like, we don't like this, and you're under pressure, is to kind of, that's, I think, when you need the meditative thinking. Because if you go into calculative mode, I think that's when you start to potentially panic.
It's reactive.
And that's
as
dangerous.
Opposed to, I mean, if we're going to make a semantic difference between reactive and responsive, right? And reactive is like, like a nervous system twitch.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've been in situations where that, a client didn't like it. Hey, everybody, we're doing like a all hands on deck. And I know you had weekends planned, but we got to do it over the weekends, and you end up with a piece of crap at the end.
Well, that's where, and in that moment, probably the thing to do is everyone go away for the weekend, and we'll come back on Monday, and because that space. I remember I worked with a brilliant creative director, but his copywriter was his passion, and he used to go off like before a pitch, and he'd just disappear. We were like, oh my God, where's he gone? Like where is he?
That's responsible. I think that's responsible.
Yeah, and he'd come back and he'd go, I have it. And he'd be like, oh my God, this is and he was brilliant. Mm-hmm. We're coming to the end of so much more I want to ask you, but I did want to ask you about, I read that you don't like to compartmentalize things into likes and dislikes.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah.
It's cheap. There's a line from Robert Fripp that like and dislike is cheap. And because that conforms to the initial response conforms to taste. And taste is, I think it's a big problem with creative people. Like we cling to our tastes so tightly. that it prevents us from opening ourselves up to potentials. And
Right.
for me, the great example is, and this is like a shameful experience of mine, is Miles Davis on the Corner. Miles Davis on the Corner is an amazing record. I didn't listen to it for 25 years.
Right.
Because the artwork looked like kind of Fat Albert kind of like cartoons. I was like, hey, no, I'm a serious jazz listener. I'm not going to listen to that. But what was happening was Miles Davis was like looking at his audience. It's like, what are all the white people here doing here? Where are the people that look like me?
Right.
And so he purposefully packaged this music and changed his music to appeal to a black audience, right? And it's amazing. I mean, it's funky, and it's also, you hear Karl-Heinz Stockhausen's influence at the same time. I mean, it's incredible work. And the cartoons were drawn by a childhood friend of his and an old friend of his named Corky McCoy. And I now look at Corky McCoy as one of the great unsung heroes of graphic design. He's only done like maybe 2 or 3 record covers. I mean, if I ever had a client and he's still alive too. If I ever had a client like open-minded enough, I would want to hire Corky McCoy to draw cartoons for that record because I need to pay homage to this person. So for what I'm saying is that taste, my taste, prevented me from listening to something which is opened my head.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's why I hate likes and dislikes. I hate them.
And you talked earlier on a bit about pride as well as kind of being the thing that gets in all of our ways. I don't think it's just a creative pursuit. I think we all have pride.
Well, pride. Pride is fueled by taste.
Yeah. And you can't like let it go. Tell me a bit about Malcontent. And what you're working on at the moment, if you can. I know there's a multiple NDA.
Yeah, I do have some multiple NDAs that I can't really talk. But it's interesting. Like companies will have me come in for like short periods of time or like intermittently over the course of several months while they're working on a project to either like, let's take a look at the deck, let's take a look at the presentation. I'm like, well, like you're saying this here, you're saying that there. So I'm at that point, I'm like a dramaturge, I guess. Other times, someone will, a larger firm that's doing a big pitch in a sector that they don't know much about, but I do because I've worked in a lot of sectors. They'll ask me to do some. Hey, I just need like a basic grounding, like what it means to be in financial services, what it means to be in this kind of technology, and then I'll pull together a report and we'll have a conversation about that. So I do that, but I'm also designing. Like I'm designing right now I'm working on a 12-inch record package for a new band called 37 Houses, right? Okay. And working on my client Ethel, the avant-garde string quartet, who I've been friends with for 2.5 decades, 25 years. Where they're starting a record label and are doing new releases, and so I'm going to work on those. And then this menswear line, which I guess I'm slowly I'm head of brand of the thing, and I'm slowly going to grow into some other aspect once we're working on financing and funding and all that bit. So it's multivariate. I just finished a rebranding of a music performance series in Denver called the Music Appreciation Society, and I'm really happy with that work. Our color palette, I haven't put it out, I haven't done the case study yet, but the color palette is all based on, because it's music, I have trios, quartets, and quartets, and so colors can come in 3s, 4s, and 5s, whatever, or duets too, duos. And I'm open to what the colors are as long as they're combined in a certain way. I don't care what color it is. And
That's amazing.
Like I'm looking to do things like that to try and break these rules like that.
And you love it. Like I can tell, just even you talking about that, you absolutely adore what you do. That passion is still there, and then you teach as well, which is obviously just
that fuels that one fuels the other. Okay, because working gives you that point of view, and so having worked for myself and having worked for companies, I have a point of view about certain cultures, internal cultures and that kind of thing, or like what it is to deal with client culture and their, assuaging their fears and issues. And my clients also like that I teach.
Right.
So because they it helps them feel like I'm serious about what I'm doing. Yeah, I guess.
But also imagine through the teaching as well, you're getting back to all these different perspectives, right? Like
also like I've hired students to work for me, and students have hired me to work for them. So
amazing.
It becomes an interesting power dynamic, but yeah, I'm open to it.
That's brilliant. Listen, we're at time. I did want to just lastly mention the thing that you said to me before we started here, which was you know Debbie Millman well, and you were gifted a That's What I Call Marketing water bottle from Debbie, which is just incredible. My mind was blown by that.
It was like small little things coming together.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for me, that was
Debbie and I met. We were both authors on Speak Up, which was the first design blog, and became friends. Actually, have taken vacations together. And all.
Oh, wow.
So she's seen me through many ups and downs in my life, and so she's a good friend and very supportive cheerleader as well.
Well, she's an incredible person, as we were saying, and just kind of cheerleaders are a great word, and as are you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time, because you were here to do this event, but you stopped your plans to sit with me, and I really appreciate it.
I was happy to do it, and thank you. Thank you for actually thoroughly researched questions. God.
No problem. And Universal Principles of Branding is out, so people can.
It's been out for almost a year.
Yeah.
Almost a year.
So
actually, I'm coming out with a pocket edition.
Oh, I meant to ask you about that.
So it's kind of like the Book of Hours, I guess. Like instead of the full Bible, you have the Book of Hours.
It's on the go.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's in production. Just sent all the files off literally days ago. And then I'm working on this series where I'm editing a series of books written by my colleagues at the School of Visual Arts Masters in Branding program. And the first three are, one is The Meaning of Branded Objects by my colleague, Dr. Tom Guariallo. And the other one is A History of Branding by my colleague, Richard Scheer. And both are founding faculty and members. What? And I'm writing a book, Brands in the Age of AI, where I'm engaging, not in calculative, but meditative thinking about the ramifications of AI in brands. So a lot of people look at it as, oh my God, they're coming to take my job, which is an immediate response, right? And there's a professor in the United States named Scott Galloway who calls AI corporate Ozempic.
Right.
Which, so people are looking, and I have friends who are losing their jobs because companies think that the promise of AI will allow them to kind of really prune the roles of employees. But for me, like I said earlier, AI kind of reveals potentials and possibilities. And one of these possibilities is to really use it in such a way to kind of give people a sense that they're being seen. I'm talking about the customer kind of thing. So that's what I'm interested in. So that's what this book's more about.
Can't wait for those to.
Yeah, me too. In the middle of it, panic
on the plane. Shh. Mark, thanks so much. An absolute treat to spend time with you today.
Same
Thanks
here.
a million.
Great.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
So I hope you enjoyed that episode with Mark Kingsley. Even if you were at the IAPI event, I think there's so much in this episode for you. He really was such an engaging person to sit down with, have a conversation with. I love the Dapper Dan story. I love that role, and his resurgence almost was really, really interesting to hear. And Mark's perspective on AI and creativity is going to be really, really interesting. And obviously he's writing about that, and there's going to be a book out on that pretty soon. So that is something that I would love to have Mark back on the show to talk to me about. And of course, how wonderful to hear that connection with the wonderful Debbie Millman, one of my early guests, and That's What I Call Marketing. So that was just amazing to hear. So thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, if you have enjoyed the episode and you would like to rate or review it for me, I would be really, really grateful. Of course, do share it wherever you are listening, watching. If you're seeing the episodes, turn up on social media and you can share them with your colleagues. I would be really, really grateful. So for me, your host, Conor Byrne, remember we have a new episode out next Tuesday. So stay tuned to That's What I Call Marketing. Thanks so much for tuning in.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.